All right, there we go. We're ready.
All right, so that is the disclaimer for Burleson County. Typically, you won't have an adversary. Your first court report will be a status court report, which we can work on together. All right, court report writing. She gave me something that doesn't work.
Oh, let me make sure it's got the green showing.
Yeah, it's not on, but it's okay.
There you go.
A court report is a professional legal document, a living document, and it should be clear and concise. When you are writing your court report, you don't want to put your feelings. You don't want to put what you think. You want it to be, again, you're essentially putting in an order of your recommendations. You're documenting your investigation of the case and then what CASA's recommendations are. It's a legal document that is public information to all parties, and the judge is reading this as well as other attorneys. And what it means by being a living document is, again, you're actively investigating throughout the life of your case. You do not, each court report, you're going to talk about that 3-month period. You know, you don't necessarily have to refer all the way back to the very beginning of the case. It should be moving along with the case, your court report should. There should be some form of progression. If there is not a progression, typically your supervisor sit with you and say, hey, like what's going on here? What do we need to do? Do we need to put fire up under CPS, or are there some alternatives? What do we need to switch up? You will write a court report. For instance, if it goes in parental rights are changed up, we basically follow a child all the way to the end of permanency being achieved, be it adoption, be it a permanent PMC agreement between the parent and the relative. You will continue to write court reports through that process. Only difference is you'll write them less frequently, more time goes by. Tips, make it great. Do not use I, me, or we. You would use this CASA or CASA. We are one entity. Though you are the volunteer that you're assigned, Voices for Children is the CASA entity. That is who is making the recommendation. When you make the statements of I, you're almost putting yourself at the liability of those statements and things to that effect. And a good attorney can come back and use that against you if they wanted to nitpick, I promise. So you want to say CASA because it is us as a whole. You're not making that decision by yourself. That's typically a decision that's being made between you and your supervisor, but your supervisor is really there to just kind of facilitate what you're thinking and feeling and making sure that you can put it in a concise wording. Include the month, the day, and the year. Typically, it is awesome to have dates. You'll be surprised how many reports I get that have last year. Okay, well, when last year? What happened last year? I had to catch it today in a court report because when my volunteer mentioned last year, she was referring to a case from last year. Very dangerous because we're bringing in old information to a totally separate case to a new case. So you want to make sure that you have dates, month, date, and years. Be consistent. So if you decide to do numerical format, you're going to use that numerical format throughout your entire court report every time you refer to a date. Or if you choose to use the wording and write it out, the same. When you are writing your court reports, again, we don't give information, we take in information. So you're not going to list the foster parent's name. You'll typically refer to them as the placement, the caregiver, or the foster mom, foster dad, or sibling, foster sibling, something to that effect. You don't put their addresses, please. Don't put addresses. Typically you won't put addresses for anybody. CASA does not want to be responsible for releasing or leaking information. Some cases are what I would classify as high profile or high contention, and you don't want to give a placement's address. Parents will kidnap their children. Parents will hurt other people behind their children. So you want to be very careful about that type of identifying information in a court report. And I kind of with the teachers as well. You know, these are people that have to see these people all day, every day, and they're not necessarily protected. So you want to be limited on who said what. You want to convey information, but try not to throw a teacher under the bus and have this mom or dad heated at a teacher.
So would you say something like a teacher said that,
Yes.
and blah, blah, blah?
Yes, or you could say that CASA's had an opportunity to visit with the school, and these are some of the things that we learned. Yes. So that's where that is when it comes to foster parents. List your sources of information. His first foster parent report, he has adjusted well and is attending school. You have some kids who can switch placements 3 times while they're in foster care. It is not uncommon. I've had a child that's just been in 4 foster placements in less than 3 months. So it is definitely not uncommon, which is why you want to be specific in who and what you're talking about. If, for instance, if they were in a psych hospital, you know, that this is information you obtained either from the psych hospital or while the child was in the psych hospital, their second foster home. You can list the city and the state, but you typically don't want to put an address. Do not replicate CPS's court report. They are responsible for getting a court report out to us 10 days before the court hearing. I don't want to see it identical. I can tell you that. I mean, their court report is pretty detailed and has a lot of information. You want your court report to be your investigation and your words. I'd rather you say, Chantel, I just didn't have time. Or be honest. That way we can sit down and kind of go through the alternatives or find out ways of how we can get information to produce a court report versus you waiting on CPS's court report, because sometimes their information is not valid. Not because it's wrong, but they may have gotten that information 2 weeks ago and you have information as of a week and change. And the judges do read our court reports. And if they're reading replicas, then that questions what is our ability and are we really being an advocate for the children? Or are we just doing something? Do list your independent sources. So that is, if you've talked to the caseworker, for instance, you weren't able to get the medical information from the doctor or the foster mom, and you did talk to the CPS caseworker, you can state, according to the CPS caseworker, the child was seen by Dr. So-and-so or by his physician on June the 3rd. Everything looks good. CASA will continue to request those records. That's typically what you would put. Indicate your attempts. This comes in handy. Record everything, because you can reach out to a therapist and they won't respond. That's why I think email is awesome. Paper trails is everything when it comes to the legal side of that. If you have it documented that you've attempted to contact this therapist 4 times, this therapist will not respond to you. Of course, hopefully by that time, your supervisor will step in, send an email and a follow-up. If not, we get to go before the judge. And believe it or not, a therapist can be subpoenaed for not cooperating and possibly removed from the case. So that's the same with CPS. If we have made attempts to talk to the caseworker is not responding, your supervisors made attempts to go through their supervisor and follow the chain of command, we can go before the judge and say, hey, we're not able to talk to them, we've attempted, we've asked these questions in this email. It applies to attorneys too. I've had one attorney who, she was a fireball. She's gotten a promotion since. But she was definitely a fireball, and she would be like, well, I haven't heard from you. I don't recall that email. And lo and behold, she responded to it. So it's like, you don't want to throw people under the bus, but if there's information you need, it is okay to take it to the judge and let the judge handle it. Same with parents. We're responsible for meeting parents. It is a part of your minimum standards. So if you're not able to contact the parent and we've gone through their attorney in those avenues, we can go before the judge and say, we've attempted to contact this mom for 3 months and we really want to see how her progress is going and we need to be able to go out to the home. She won't permit us. It is okay to say that. So that is why it's important to document how many times you've attempted. Even if you don't have a successful call for a home visit, if you called and attempted, put it in Optima. Yes.
Is
Oh,
there-
me? Oh.
So if the therapist or whatever, if they're like working with CPS and like everything's good 100% with them, but they're not working with us, we just let it go and just get everything from CPS, or?
It all depends on the case. So something you'll talk to your supervisor about. Some therapists do ask, hey, go through the CPS caseworker. And as long as you have that in writing and that there's an understanding and that's the avenue that they want us to go, we can use that. But if they're not giving CPS anything either, and we're not getting records 3 and 4 months later, then we can definitely push the envelope for our own avenue. But if we can get the records,
Then just leave it.
let it be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My question was kind of similar to hers, but so basically, even if we're getting the information from CPS and not directly from the therapist because they won't cooperate, do we still have to make note that the therapist isn't cooperating with us?
So if they have asked you to go through the CPS caseworker and the CPS caseworker is getting it to you in a timely manner, then we can use that and you can state, according to the therapist's recommendations, this is what's happening, because that's the avenue of communication that they've asked you to go through. Now, if you don't have that, typically, then yes, you're gonna keep pushing the envelope. But again, we all work as one, so if that's the way we can get the information, and that's what they've made very clear, then we can go with it. Yeah, you can still use it, because you have it in written documentation that that's what he or she has asked of you. So should you have to go before trial or an appeal, which is not likely, but that's, I think an appeals process. So you're covered in that. And so, yeah, but if you don't have that wording, then yeah, you wanna kinda keep pushing the issue, can I get these records directly? Or if they do it over the phone, send a follow-up email. Is this correct that you would like for us to obtain these records through CPS per our conversation? So CYA is. Use unbiased language. Make it great. Do not state the father is in jail and won't be able to work services to get his or her kids. Father God in heaven. Yeah, as of today, I had to correct that. Just because they are in jail does not mean they cannot work services. For instance, I had a dad on this case today, originally was in jail, has a nice little sentence, but he paroled 2 weeks ago. So he now wants to be a part of his kid's life. So, there's different parameters of when they're in jail. But then I have another dad who's gonna be in jail for 45 years, and he won't parole by the time we get out of this case. So he will be limited in his services, because he can still, depending on where he goes, he or she, it's not just men who go to jail, but the moms as well. Some of they have programs and things that they can go to, and parenting and counseling and things to that effect. So just because they're in jail does not mean they cannot work services. If a parent is in jail, we will still make contact with that parent, scheduling to go visit a parent in jail Thursday with a volunteer.
Which jail?
What's jail?
Yeah, I just listed.
What's jail?
Which?
Oh, which jail? Brazos County.
Ooh, nothing more fun.
Yeah, Brazos County. Typically, we don't get as much leeway with TDCJ, Texas Department of Criminal Justice. That's just a lot of red tape. So you mainly want to go through the attorney on that one, because they can get in before CASA can get in with them. But yeah, so yes, please don't write that. That's judgmental, and that's just assuming that his dad is not going to have anything to do with their kid, and that's not always true. I had one that wrote me one in pencil, like we sent a letter out. We actually did a PMC agreement with him, and he was in jail, but we didn't have to terminate his rights because he would be home shortly after we closed our case, but he was okay with his child staying with the mother. He didn't want his rights terminated, wanted to be a part of his child's life, and went through the parenting. He went through all of his services that was on his service plan. And so we were able to do a PMC agreement with them. So because they're in jail doesn't mean that you get to count them out. And as well as if they have certain charges, because they are the parent, they have a little bit more leeway than relatives. When you're searching for placements, if you hear about if they have certain charges that they're not able to get their children, it's a different line when it comes to the parent. They might have to have some restrictions, but because it's their parental rights at stake, they don't fall under the same bar as a relative placement. You had a question?
Oh, no, I don't have it.
Okay. Used unbiased language, make it great again. Due to Mr. Smith's recent incarceration, he is limited in his ability to work services and provide a safe and stable home for his children. Again, you want to always speak to best interest. You know, what is his abilities to provide a safe and stable home for his child?
Do the prisons and jails, help the parent work on the services right there in jail?
So what you do is you ask the parent what services are available to them. It is not something that I've had to do a lot of homework on, but I would be interested to find out if there is a liaison and there's someone who we could talk to find out what the programs are, which a volunteer or probably a supervisor could contact that unit to see what services are available to them and what they could work, but the caseworker could also do that as well.
There's another advantage to incarceration, and it's drug use. Typically, that's, they're clean on the drug test, which is often on the services list.
Yeah. So, some
You
positives.
know where they are, so you can always go see them.
They are maintaining the stable residence. I know exactly where they are. All right. Reports are due to the coordinator 14 days before the court date. Rule of thumb, I say if you can push it out 3 weeks, get your court report in. I say that for the simple fact that it doesn't really go past the supervisor's eyes. It has to go to program director level as well and be approved. So it goes to 3 or 4 different edits. You would send the court report. What I love now about us switching to Google is we can do the report at the same time. So if there's some corrections or things that we need to tweak, we can kind of do it simultaneously versus before you would have to email it to me, I'd have to review it, email it back to you. Whereas now we can put comments, say, hey, please go check it, look at the comments on the side and you can update accordingly. And then we send it off to Tricia and Tricia would approve. Or if there's anything else we need to change. The 14 days is very important because by law, we are required to file our court reports 5 days before the court hearing. And so you have to be very careful and keep mindful of which county you're serving because they all meet on different days. And so that can vary of when you need to have your court report in. The different sections. So the initial section is the children in the situation. And I apologize because we need to update this according to your format.
Yeah, the EFE one.
So now the previous CPS history is actually under the children's situation. So you would put the children, their date of birth, and how old they are. You will address their placements, and then you will address when either emergency TNC or temporary management conservatorship was obtained and when CASA was appointed as guardian ad litem. Then it goes into the previous CPS history.
Right, and the good news is for most of you, except those working in Burleson County, you're gonna have all that information like you do right in front of you, it's already there. So previous history isn't gonna change, birth dates, you know, how old they are, and all that stuff isn't gonna change, so
Yeah.
that'll be all right.
And then the permanency plan, for my understanding is that for an adversary, it's gonna be what your recommended permanency would be. Because they typically don't have one at the adversary. Family reunification is normally your permanent, your permanency goal. Your initial permanency goal is family reunification. And then you will go into the concurrent, again, you can address all of those because there's so many of them, and different circumstances would require a different goal. So there's a permanency goal and a concurrent goal. You would list that a whole lot easier after the adversary because you know what it's going to be. If you don't agree with it, you don't have to agree with it, and once you learn what all the goals are, CASA can make recommendations for those goals to be different. And then it'd be up to the judge. Summary of contacts, so you would list each person you've talked to and what their relationship is to the case or the child.
I noticed that the Miss Bettercount, the names on this are great, by the way. She's named the foster parents for Rose or not. So is there a difference in the shelters and the foster parents in the way that we address them in the report?
Well, the placement for the boys is the shelter, but by the time you're writing your report, Robert's with his dad and Ben is with his aunt. Is that the question you were
I
asking?
was asking because we were told not to name foster parents, so it says foster parents.
So that's a
So,
shelter, that's different,
It's
that's a
different.
contracted facility. It's not necessarily a licensed foster home. So when you start getting into RTCs and shelters, you can use case manager names. You can even use case managers if you, so in a foster home, you typically are not going to have interaction with the case manager. The case manager is normally if a child is in another facility. So that's residential facilities, it's not a group home, it's called something else now.
I can't remember what
I
it's
don't know, they
called.
keep changing it, so, yeah. But you can use the case manager's names there, but it's more of your private foster homes. Say, for instance, if you were a foster home, yeah, we wouldn't use your name. So, yes.
Good question.
And I believe that is that. That's a summary of your last contacts from your last review. Then you want to get into the child. You're going to address the child. You want to say something good about this child. What is something that you observe about this child and their behaviors, how they interact with people? You know, what are their hobbies? What do they like to do? So example, in your court report, it says that Ben is a healthy teenage boy. He misses his dog and worries about his dog's well-being with him not being there. He enjoys video games and basketball with his younger brother. Just something nice, short, sweet, and simple. Remember, everybody is reading this, so you don't want to write like a full paragraph and a whole research paper.
And the court doesn't want to read a research paper, that's
I
for sure.
promise you, I'd rather have 10 pages with 10 kids versus 10 pages with one kid. That is just too much.
Is that something that would just kind of stay consistent? Or would you change that for?
Part of that will stay consistent. As it progresses, it should change. You know, what is this child's demeanor? You know, from 3 months ago, has this child opened up? Because you might say that this child was very quiet and reserved, and 3 months later, you know, CASA's had an opportunity to build a rapport. He seems to be more receptive and willing to talk and communicate.
So I'm assuming that when we first write these, that someone will help us kind of guide us, because I'm really worried, because I'll be taking off my other hat from the medical field, where we have to tell every detail when they said it, how they said it, what time it was.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm assuming someone will help.
The one,
Yeah,
I have
and
a
that's-
former nurse that, we're working through that. Because that's how she documents. She literally documents I walked into the home, this is what I saw, this is what
Right.
happened, this is, like, she writes her thoughts. She's like, what are you thinking? This is what I was thinking. Do you want to know why I thought this? And this is what happened. Bam, 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 bam. What do you think, Chantel? And I'm like, oh, God. So, yeah, we definitely work with you on that. We'll help guide you. And what we ended up actually having to do was I had to go out to a visit with her, and we observed, we did the same thing. She wrote how she documents, I wrote how I document, and she was like, oh, that's how that works. Yes, you don't have to list every single detail. Yeah.
And just keep in mind, the court is reading it, the attorneys are reading it, parents can
Yes.
read it, kids have access to it. When they're 18, they have access to everything, so, not court reports,
They have access to it.
they're files.
No, the age has changed. I believe it's 8, but it used to be 14 or older.
Oh,
They get a court report. We would send one to them as well. Typically, we don't because we send it to their ad litem. But CPS, yes, they have a right to be in court. Though Burleson County tells you they don't want the kids in the court, but the kid does have a right to be in court.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Wednesday, was there a child in there? Okay, that's what I couldn't hear, so I didn't know if the mom was consoling the child, and
There was a
then-
child there, and there were a couple of kids that ended up coming back to talk to the judge.
Okay.
and who had a question back here, Mr. Moore?
When you interview and say the child or anything, what parents, you don't take your notes then,
What do you mean?
or like your court report, you write that after you've done the interview with, say, the parents or kid.
I'm confused.
Yeah,
Okay, ask
so-
that again.
You don't
Ask it
take
again.
notes while you're talking with them.
I mean, I do. I used to tell my kids, you know, or even now if I go out with somebody, I apologize, you know, my memory, I got a lot going on. I'll be taking a few notes, depending on the age of the child too. I mean, you kind of want to assess the situation for what it is, but if you need to take notes, then it's okay to say, while we're having this meeting, I will be taking some notes, but you kind of want to give them your attention as much as possible and kind of
Let them
learn
know
your,
You will be
right.
taking notes because some folks get upset at what you write.
yes. And just imagine a caseworker who has to go in sitting with a computer and they're sitting there typing like that. I never got with that one. I would take a notebook. You know, it was easier to just to jot down some things to sit there. I thought it was very rude to sit in someone's home with a computer. Just don't. I know that everybody's in this technology phase. Take pen and paper in their houses if you can. Or, you know, certain tablets, because they're defensive. You know, some parents, you'd be surprised how paranoid they are. You know, and if they see you have like a tablet that has a camera, they might think you're recording them and things like that. So be very mindful that it's sensitive for them. You know what your role is and your intentions are not to hurt or harm them, but they don't know that. You know, they feel like everybody is against them. But you do what you have to do. I'm not gonna tell you not to, but I just say, be mindful, because they do. Their mind is wandering and they're, you know, some of them be like, well, you're gonna use this against me in court. Possibly, but being transparent, I promise you it'll get you a lot further.
Yeah.
But, so that, you wanna speak on the children, then you wanna get to their physical health, you know. Are there any concerns that need to be addressed? This is where it's important to find out when they have what they call well checks through Star Health Medicaid. Every child that comes into CPS automatically has Medicaid the day that investigations gets involved. They have a Medicaid number. Each placement they go to, they have to go and have a new well check for the most part, unless CPS is like, it just happened 3 weeks ago, not even 3 weeks ago, 3 days ago, nothing's changed in 3 days. Unless there were some concerns on why that child was moved from their home and they may have to have another medical, which we had to do.
So like the case you have, where they've been moved 4 times in like 3 months, how many checks does he have?
He wasn't there long enough to get 2 of them. So he wasn't even there long enough, but he would have had 4. I had one, the grandma had the kids, took him to the doctor, but she came back that mind you, this baby was 2. Then she needed melatonin and all these different things and all these behaviors. We ended up having to send the baby back when we moved again. None of that was true. None of that was not necessary. So again, it goes back to, it all depends on, you know, what the circumstances of that child having to move and how their appointments are set up. But they are required to have a new exam every time they move. And that's why it's important to follow up. That's why we request medical records, because a caregiver will say one thing and you talk to the doctor and the doctor's like, I never said that, I never gave that recommendation. So you want to have proof for yourself of what happened during that visit, or especially if children are on psychotropic meds. Judge Delaney is really big on that. So if you have a child that is an MHMR patient or receiving certain medications, please know their medications. And please know why they're taking it, and ask the child if they're having any side effects. And if they say they are, address that with CPS and everybody that needs to know. Yeah, if you ever want to be embarrassed, that would be the one thing. He does not take that lightly at all. It's just very serious for him.
Do we notate the name of the drug and dosage of the drug?
Yes.
Is that important?
Yes, it is even okay to ask, may I get a picture of that? Get a picture of the bottle, because you want to see who's prescribing that. Is this old medication, is this new medication? Or they say, oh, he's going to see Dr. So-and-so, but you see Dr. Williams on here versus Dr. Jones. Well, where did Dr. Williams come from? You know, who is Dr. Williams? And, you know, is this child taking their medication? Yeah.
Do we do the same for parents?
Mhm.
Do we- okay.
If you know that your parents are on medication, definitely.
You can just ask them if I can take a picture of the bottle.
You ask them, is it okay? Yeah, you ask them for permission.
Do they usually Are they usually receptive?
Most of them are receptive. If they know they're on medications, they'll tell you, oh, I take Seroquel, da. Yeah, they will tell you gladly. But, I mean, and those are things that you want to take into consideration too, because when you're doing their court reports, if they are on medications, are they maintaining their medications? Is there a change in them maintaining their medications? Because oftentimes they go so long without it. And so you might see positive reaction in their medications. So yeah, you do want to find out what it is. And then that also kind of helps you with their diagnosis and being able to communicate with them. When you realize they're taking certain meds, it's like, oh, they're bipolar. Okay. So if there's a manic day, if it's a day that's a bad day, you'd be like, we'll try this again in a couple of days.
How long do we typically have to compile this report together? I know you said it was like due about 3 weeks before actually go to court, but how much time do we have? Like, what's the time?
You have 3 months to build your court report. That is it. Typically, all your documentation in Optima should be building the foundation for your court report. All you're doing is summarizing it and minimizing all of those contacts into specific facts. You know, had an opportunity to observe, or you could say the kids had 6 visits. CASA had an opportunity to observe 2 of those 6 visits. These are the things that we saw between the mom and the dad, and you would document whatever you had in your contact. And then if you feel like those visits have led to them making more, then you could put in a recommendation. Or if you feel like they're not good for the kids, CASA recommends that they be restricted or reduced.
So the example that we had was for the adversary hearing, so I'm assuming the court report for the following one is going to be significantly longer than this?
Yes.
Typically.
Typically, this is just to give you an idea of what you'll build from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the physical health. Dates are always awesome. Under the physical health, you'll also do dentals. You'll be surprised, but babies have to go to the dentist now too in CPS care. Makes no sense, but state of Texas says they need to. So they go and they get their little gums exam. So it's just like whatever works for them. So yeah, you want to find out if they've had any dentals. If you have kids who have had developmental specialists because of drug and alcohol, you'd be surprised how many babies are born with delays. It typically doesn't show up until later, but that's also where you would document it in that physical health. If they have future appointments and things to that effect. You are able to go to those appointments as well, just coordinate with the caregiver, but you can attend medical appointments with the children.
And I think that's in one of the videos, doesn't the CASA go with her to, yeah, to the doctor's appointment?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, what you are not allowed to do, and you know, we got a nice little email from Texas CASA, you cannot go to therapy with the children. You cannot sit in the lobby while the children are in therapy. We are not permitted to do that. That will get us in a world of trouble. So yeah, but doctor's appointments you are able to attend.
Why doctor's appointments and not therapy?
So that's like a whole breach of confidentiality, and I don't know if it's so much a breach of confidentiality, but you have the confidentiality issue. Then you have some who take over, and that impedes on the therapist being able to evaluate and build rapport and help the child for whatever they're going through. That's that child's time with the therapy. If you have questions or concerns, you would send yours in an email. If there's something that you feel the therapist should address, then that's what you want to do. Because typically the parents are not there. Nobody is there. Parents or anybody. Maybe an attorney, but that's very seldom. That's their time to be evaluated. And you'd be surprised, some people have a lot of time on their hands and they just want to be involved and they want to be there. And again, you know, that could be a trigger for a kid. I see my CASA when I walk in, probably not going to talk to you today. Or I might be comfortable, but it's a 50-50 chance. So that's a neutral place for them. It's not our place to be there. Doctor's appointments, it's okay to find out what's going on firsthand to assess. I've gone to the hospital to see a baby and who the mom had Munchausen syndrome, but I need to see from my own eyes what was going on with this baby. And she was actually healthier, and hearing it from the doctor was a lot different than reading those reports. When you get a stack this big, literally this big, it's hard to kind of decipher what they're talking about. So you can ask questions. I had a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
My question was basically, you answered most of it, but I was just going to ask, what would be a reason to go along with the doctor's appointment rather than just talking with the doctor separately? Is it just a convenient time to do that, or?
You don't have to, honestly. It's not really a rule of thumb. It's just, it's okay if you wanted to. I'll have to ask a couple of my volunteers why they felt the urge to go. I have one, I mean, she did go for the developmental specialist. She went with them to Temple for the appointment. And I think it was just more so to get that firsthand knowledge of what was going on, to hear for herself what the recommendations were. I don't know if you've ever played the game, but I could say something, tell it to her, and it'll, by the time it gets to you, it is completely relayed differently than what I was trying to tell you. So sometimes you need to hear from the horse's mouth, especially when it comes to those medical issues, and delays and things like that. Sometimes foster parents don't relay it the way the doctor did. So that's the benefit of it, but I'm gonna ask my volunteer, I wanna know now. So that's that. I try to make this quick. Placements, you wanna talk about where the child is placed and how they're doing in their placement. You wanna ask about family and if there are any potential family members or relatives or people that this child may want to live with. And that's something that we can put in our court reports, and we recommend that CPS look into, and seeing if that placement is viable. Their siblings, you want to address who they are. Typically, you're going to refer to the siblings that are in the case, because you have some cases where they have older siblings, and you can address them, but mainly they're talking about, like, are they placed together? If 5 kids were removed from the home, are those 5 kids placed together, or are they in separate homes? Do they get to see their siblings? If they do have older siblings, you can document it, because sometimes those older siblings are placements. I have a teenager who's with his 21-year-old brother. Not common, but that's what it is. And so he's placed with his brother right now. Visitation, you want to talk about what the visitation schedule is and how that child reacts to visitation. Because you'll see visitation under each child section if there's multiple kids. You want to address how, which child did they start with? How Ben is reacting to the visitation versus Robert. You know, even for babies. Sometimes some babies are more fussy and more agitated after visits. Sometimes babies are calm. You want to document during those visits, are they being changed appropriately when they are smaller? Are they being fed during that visit, or is this baby leaving this visit hungry? Things to that effect. And again, don't forget to put the frequency. Are they meeting monthly, weekly? How long are these visits? And then CASA can put in their recommendation as well on whether those should be expanded, or if there's something you'd like to see during those visits, you can put it in there. I do say whatever you put in your court report, please don't let it be a surprise to anybody. Talk to people. Talk to your caseworker, talk to the attorneys. You know, do not surprise them with information in your court report. Even if it's something that's going to be adversarial and you know they are not for it, go ahead and tell them, hey, this is what I'm putting in my court report. And they might be like, I can't believe you're doing that. Okay, but we'll let the judge handle it and be done. Healthy attachments. You want to discuss who they have a strong bond with. You know, if they're bonded to their siblings, if they're bonded to a relative placement, if they have a bond with their parents or things to that effect. Who does this child relate to? Who does this child feel comfortable with? And that's typically what you would do for each child. And I will fast forward. We've done all of that. This is wonderful. We are making it to the parents. All right, to the parents. You also want to, this is where it comes into building a rapport with your parents. You want to say something nice about them. And what they're doing, things to that effect. And then for your court-ordered services, typically that's what's done during the adversary after they have a family group conference. There are some services in the adversary, so in the ex parte order. And so if you do get that at the very, very beginning, it's okay to ask the investigator, hey, are there services this mom or dad was supposed to initiate before we got to the adversary? Again, in Burleson County, typically we don't have that. They don't really start services until after the fact. but those are things that you want to document what their services are. You will have an outline list of what the service plan is. Please put those services in there. Do not generalize the services. I see it a lot and they put it in a paragraph form, and that can alter what they're actually court ordered to do. So you want to put it the way it was court ordered by the judge, what their services were. I typically put in there, or when I go and edit for my volunteers, that if they develop that service plan at a family group conference, that the parents willingly help develop that service plan, and that their service plan was court ordered. These are the services as follow, and put them in bullet points of what their services are. Then you will address their employment and transportation. They like their changes.
Since we last did it?
Transportation is not in there.
Okay.
But employment, you want to say whether they're unemployed, whether they are employed, where are they employed, or if they're seeking employment. Don't be afraid to ask them, hey, how long has it been since you worked, or are there any skills that you think you might need to help get a different job? You know, what do you see? If they don't have a job, ask them what is their idea of a good job? You know, what do they see? Help facilitate that. Housing, you want to document whether some people will tell you they own their own home. That's fine. You just want to know that they have a stable residence. They could be living with their cousin, their grandmother, anybody. As long as they're maintaining a stable residence, that is fine. Sometimes they're maintaining that stable residence, but that doesn't mean that they're going to bring their kids to that home. They may be working to get their own apartment or to get a bigger house. Go ahead.
I was just, do you want specificity when it's like noticing here, Mr. Price resides with his mother? It doesn't say in an apartment or a single-family residence or anything. Do you want that kind of information?
I say put as much information as you can.
Okay, that's just thinking.
Yeah. I say put as much information as you can, that you can state that they reside in a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home, you know, but it's okay to say that they reside in a single-family home or an apartment complex. Because those are things that you're going to consider when it's time to remove and make a recommendation for a child to return home. Now, I will tell you, Judge Delaney can tell you that they can live in a cardboard box. So please, 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 please be very mindful of what your recommendation is of their housing and things to that effect. It may not be upper middle class or the upper echelon, but if they have running water, if they have food for the children may have to sleep on an air mattress. That is fine. Is not enough to terminate a parent's rights because that's all they can afford.
What if they live in a homeless shelter?
You can document that, and there are some homeless shelters that take children in as well.
Couldn't be their permanent plan, but like this homeless shelter has a transition program.
Right, Twin
So
City
they could be
Mission.
involved in that.
So like the example that we were given, so what, is this the description like that's in here, you know, very dirty and cluttered house kind of thing?
So you can say that CASA's had an opportunity to visit the home, there were
Right.
concerns, these are what CASA's concerns were, and address those concerns. Again, be very respectful of what you say. You can say what you think and feel in a tactful way, without being demeaning to a placement.
Okay.
So I'm gonna back up just a little bit. In the history for Kathy and Ernie, so in here, for example, it has that he performed community service for an arrest for marijuana in 2001. His child wasn't even born then. So how far back in history of criminal record do we go? Like any criminal history?
CPS pulls all, but
Yeah, so
Okay.
if it's in
they
there.
can go back to juvenile,
Okay.
because most people don't think to have their records sealed.
Who else had a question?
All right, so we're almost done.
I know. That's okay. We're gonna be talking about outer counties another night.
Yes.
Don't worry.
So housing, but you want to address that. If you do have an opportunity to go out to the home, then address your visit at that home, and if there's any concerns, you might realize, oh, they need plugs, you know. We can make a recommendation that we can try to help with that and get them little plug covers or things to that effect. it's okay for them to tell you what they need. Ask them, you know, is there anything else that you would like for your children to have, or something to that effect. We may not be able to get it, but we can definitely reach out to resources to see. I have a kid that just returned home, mom moved into a new home, she needed beds. So we can request those things.
In another county, one of the judges liked to see pictures, photographs of the house, of the bedroom, of the, he really wanted to see where
you
this
just ask
child
him?
was or where you were recommending and what it was.
And it's okay to ask them for pictures.
Yeah, you can ask to take, most people have a camera on their phone, it's okay to ask, don't take pictures, on the slide.
No.
Right.
Which I had a CASA do, you know.
gosh.
Really not good.
Yeah.
It really does not build trust and rapport with parents.
Yeah, typically you want to ask them for a tour of the home, you know. May I have a tour of the home? Where would the child sleep if the child were returned to your home, either today or in the future? And then, is it okay if I take pictures so that we can show the other parties? And that's, they normally will go with it. Now, don't go in on the first visit and do that. But as far as the tour of the home, yeah, but the first visit, like, yeah, they're probably looking at you crazy. So, yeah. So those are the things that you want to kind of go through. The visitation, this is where you get back to, as I stated, with the children and their reaction and behaviors. The same for the mom. How is mom doing with with visitation? Is she maintaining visitation? Is she coming in late, you know, at all of the visits? Is she coming in disheveled and look like she hadn't slept in 3 or 4 days? Like, what is mom's outcome with visitation? And then CASA will put their recommendation if they think that it should change. If the father or someone is incarcerated, you could state CASA will further investigate or something to that effect. Again, your supervisor will help you word that out for you. So that's what you do for the parents. The areas of concern, for instance, with Ms. Price, it was substance abuse, her inability to maintain employment, pending criminal charges, lack of involvement in her son's life, or that's Mr. Harris's concerns. And I will tell you, the concerns can be very minute to something major, so it's gonna go case by case. If you have a concern, put it in your court report. That's what we're here for. We'll either help you reword it, or we'll be like, that's not necessarily a concern, that might be an opinion.
And these are concerns for parents and children, right?
Yes, this is concerns for the entire family. If you feel like CPS is delaying services, you can put that in there as a concern. You just list all of your concerns, and it's our job to kind of help weed and kind of finagle through those. And then the recommendations.
And you wanna, we do that, yeah.
I think we've got concerns. Yeah, concerns to be addressed in the summary. Yes. Now, if you do list a concern, please make sure that you've addressed it somewhere in the other sections. You know, if you have a concern with Ms. Kathy Price's substance abuse, the hope is that somewhere underneath Ms. Kathy Price, you have notified that she has a history of substance abuse, and these are the things that she's doing. To either alleviate it or something to that effect. Or mom doesn't believe she has a substance abuse problem, but she drinks every day, or she likes to smoke, you know. You'll be surprised. They think marijuana is cigarettes. No, it doesn't work that way. So, but yeah, so whatever concerns you have, make sure that you've addressed it somewhere else in your court report. Then when you get to your recommendations must be backed up by facts. And this is typically the outline of what your recommendations will look like. It will address whether the department should remain temporary manager conservator of the children. You would ask for the placement to be continued and approved typically in your recommendations. That's typically standard. When you get to the concerns for the parents, you know, if it's for instance, this is your adversary court report, and even your status court report, it's okay to not have to specify, for instance, Ms. Kathy has substance abuse issues maintaining a job. Well, you know she developed a service plan that wasn't in place until that status hearing. So you can put in the recommendation, incorporate all those into one, that Ms. Price initiate her services of her service plan
Right, and
without
I-
having to go into each individual concern.
And that's how these are laid out here. In yours, it says that the mother, Cassie Price, engaged in court order services. So you've listed those services somewhere else. So that's why it's so generic here at the bottom, because I kind of questioned that. If this wasn't an adversary report, it would be more detailed. So in
Your adversary and your status.
and your status hearing, your adversary reports, they're not gonna be as detailed. By the time you get to that initial permanency, you can say, a concern is Kathy Price's substance abuse, and over here, on your recommendation that she go to drug treatment. You know, maybe that's our.
Or that she engaged, you can pull that service out of her service plan that, again, you wanna make sure you addressed it in her other services, that she's either participated or not participated in an assessment. And when you get to initial permanency, you can say that mom engaged in actively participate in a drug and alcohol assessment. That's when you start getting specific, as the case prolongs. Again, you wanna give them an opportunity before you start throwing the book out.
Yeah, and then the other thing I wanted to mention is in Optima, you've got her, her service plan, therapy notes, psychological assessment. I think you've got the affidavit. I don't have it in front of me, so I can't remember what else you've got. Oh, Marissa's gonna read it to us. That's impressive.
Sorry, give me a second.
On the spot, no less. Great. 'Cause I
And if
can't-
there's a conflict in the information that you received tonight, you can document at this date and time, interviewing so-and-so, put that information.
Oh, so.
Don't make it any harder than what it is.
Yeah, so if you saw something in the video and you can go with that, if you heard something in the role play, you can go with that and say as of, I think it's always 2012 in this case because it's too hard for us to change it every 3 months, so it's always 2012. So you can say as of June 11th, 2012, it was reported that, when I interviewed Kathy Price on whatever. So use whatever information. Now this court report that you're writing is so much harder than real life, because you are making things up, okay? In real life, you have the information. So try to pull your information as much as you can from the documents you have and from the role play and the videos, the stuff that you saw and heard. Thank you. I wish I could read that. You're gonna have to read that.
All right, we have the court report, the case conference review, the family service plan, the initial case assignment sheet.
Don't need that.
Sorry, the psych eval, sorry. Therapy notes, the notice of right to counsel, order to appoint gal, original petition, standards of performance, confidentiality agreement, volunteer case acceptance, and volunteer position description.
Yeah, so some of those you need, just do your case-related documents. Okay, so this isn't due until the 19th, I think. Somebody let me look at their.
Oh, I'm sure.
I'm sorry, I'm telling you a lie. Wait a minute. Hold on a second. I think it's on the,
Oh, it's right here.
that's all right. So,
Yeah, the
yeah, so it's due on the 19th. So between now, that's 5 o'clock on the 19th. Now, am I gonna dock you if you don't get it in at 5 o'clock on the? No, you're volunteers. It's okay, but do your best to get it in on the